Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're choosing to listen to this podcast. Whether you are maybe in the car or out for a run or at work, lunch break, whenever it is, I hope that you are going to enjoy it. So let's dive into things. I hope you guys are well that are listening. This is going to be podcast 2 of the Axion podcast. And today we are going to dive into three things that you need to do if you're on your fitness journey or if you're about to start your fitness journey. So, if you've not yet started and you're thinking, I'm going to listen to some advice and some podcasts before I start planning my journey, then this will probably be really important for you to listen to and really good for you to listen to. So, even if you have a friend actually and you're listening to this and you're thinking, I know someone that's about to start their fitness journey or is at the beginning of their fitness journey, I'm going to send this to them. That'd be a good idea. Send it to your friend that could maybe benefit from listening to this. And hopefully you think it's good before we dive in. So, we're going to look at 3 points for this: preparation, mindset, and then patience and expectations. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds so boring, right? But it's really important. You're probably wanting me to dive into like training and nutrition and recovery and, stuff that's quote unquote a little bit sexier. But preparation, mindset, patience, and expectations sounds boring, but it's super, super important. So let's dive into the first point and chat about this as if you're starting your fitness journey, or maybe even if you're changing direction with your fitness journey. I want you to ask yourself this question. If you're about to start a diet or maybe start a new routine or training program or nutrition program, ask yourself, are you ready for it? And what I mean by that is your life in a position where you're going to be able to experience change without it being too difficult? Now, the example that I usually speak to clients about this topic is around the whole dieting aspect. So let's say you were to take someone that really didn't enjoy their job, right? They really showed up to work, their 9 to 5, and they really hated it. Now, outside, they were in a relationship that also wasn't really that great. They weren't really fulfilled from that. And then they didn't have a massive social circle, right? So they get let's just assume that they get a lot of enjoyment across their day from the foods that they cook for themselves. Let's say they're a big foodie, right? Because a lot of people are big foodies. I'm a big foodie, right? So let's say they get a lot of their enjoyment and a lot of their pleasure from the food that they eat because that's kind of what they have control of right now, because they don't have too much control over their work, over their relationships, over their social life. So that's kind of the one key area where, yeah, they get a lot of joy from that. Now, what if I was to turn around and tell that person, right now we're actually going to take that away because we're going to go into this thing called a calorie deficit, and I'm going to, yeah, get you eating less food. So we're going to take some of that joy away. Now, all of a sudden, they're not really getting as much joy or anywhere near as much joy from their food, and they're still continuing to get no joy from, other parts of their life. That person's probably not ready to diet. That person would probably have to address their job, address their social life, maybe address their relationship. I'm saying those three things. They could be interchangeable with anything really, but they'd have to address those aspects of their life before they were ready to then, maybe tackle a diet. So are you in a position where you can experience change without it disrupting your life, without it causing too much difficulty? Now, parts of whatever change is going to be difficult. So going into a diet for the example that we just used, like part of that should be difficult, right? You're in a calorie deficit now, but the level of difficulty should be manageable for you. So that's the first question you need to ask yourself. Now, that can sound maybe a little bit extreme, but you need to be honest. You need to ask yourself, am I actually in a position where I am ready for a change in lifestyle or a change in structure or a change in routine? If not, then you'll need to address other parts of your life first. And then you can maybe come back to it at a later date. If you ask yourself that question, you think, no, I actually am in a pretty good spot. Like, I reckon I could go through some change in, lifestyle or structure or routine or diet or training, then sweet. You're probably ready to get started and get the ball rolling. Point two is going to be more so on mindset. So this is kind of once you've already started or you've established that you're gonna start, right? You're taking the leap. Now, the main thing I'm gonna chat about with mindset is something called the expectation effect. And there's kind of two aspects I want to chat about here. One of them being a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then point two being the placebo or nocebo effect. So let's dive into that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you want something to happen, your behavior may change in ways that will make it more likely to occur. So, looking at an example, let's say that you're a student. If you're a student who believes that you're going to do really, really well on a test, you're probably going to perform more confidently and you're probably going to perform better on that test. However, if we go back to a fitness example, if you're someone that's had previous bad examples of a diet or any sort of fitness objective, you may let your past experience shape your mindset for the worse. An example here would be, well, I've tried to diet in the past and it didn't work. So this diet's not going to be any different and it's probably going to fail. If that's your mindset from the get-go, you're destined for failure. You're not going to succeed. You need to believe that you can change. You need to believe that you're actually capable of sustaining and creating that change. You're pretty much destined for failure. So that's the first point within mindset. That's self-fulfilling prophecy. You need to believe that you can change before you actually go and try and tackle that change. Now let's look at point two, which is going to be the placebo effect, right? This is pretty common. But what I kind of want to address is actually more so the nocebo effect. I done a really bad way of, that was a really roundabout way of getting to what I was trying to say there, wasn't it? Not a lot of people talk about the nocebo effect, but it can be just as harmful, right? So in medicine, if a patient expects a treatment to work, even if it's like a placebo pill, let's say it's like a sugar pill or something, they may actually experience some improvement from that pill. Now that's an example. And there was a study done by Benedetti in 2007 on nocebo effects in sports and performance related specifically. So what happened was athletes were told that they were going to be given a substance that would impair their physical performance. That was actually just, the substance didn't have any effect, right? But what the result was, their performance declined significantly, even though the substance had no active ingredients. So they felt more fatigued, they felt less motivated, and they performed measurably worse. So the main kind of takeaway from this is simply believing that they had taken something harmful led to real decreases in performance. And this is the nocebo effect, where negative expectations lead to worse outcomes. And that links back into what I was talking about with this self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that, all diets are going to fail and you're never going to be able to find a diet that's going to suit you, and, you're just this anomaly that can't lose body weight or lose body fat, whatever it is, then you're never going to find success with like any diet. Doesn't really matter what the diet is. Again, you're setting yourself up for failure right at the very, very, very beginning of your fitness journey, which is not great. It's not what you want to be doing. You want to be avoiding that, of course. So let's jump into point three, which is going to be patience and expectations. Patience and expectations. So diving into expectations first. Got a little quote here that I like, and it's unspoken expectations is premeditated resentment. So basically what that means is you need to have a conversation with yourself about what's actually achievable, or better yet, you could have a conversation with an expert within the industry about what's actually achievable before you get going. Because if you sit down and you say, look, in 10 weeks, I want to drop 25 pounds, I want to put on muscle, I want to look great. If you don't share those outcomes, those expectations with someone, or you at least have a conversation within yourself, then you're never going to be able to come to the realization, perhaps, that that's not possible. That's just, I'd say it's pretty physically impossible to do. So when you then do not hit those expectations and you don't reach those goals, you're going to resent yourself, or you're going to resent whoever it was that helped you along the journey, i.e. if you got a coach or, PT or anything like that, you're going to start to resent them. Whereas if you had that conversation with them at the beginning, they would have been able to turn around to you and say, look, that's actually not achievable. So then you wouldn't be able to then resent them, and you wouldn't be able to resent yourself, because you would have had broken down what's actually achievable over a certain time frame. So this is why you need to have an understanding of what's possible. On one side of the argument, do not put limits on yourself, like, while being realistic. Like, don't say, I only want to lose £5 over the course of this year, right? We all know that you can more than likely achieve way more than that. So try not to put too many limits on yourself, but at the same time, you need to be honest. You need to think, right, okay, with where I'm at right now, within my life, with my current lifestyle, my current training, and my current nutrition, what can I actually expect to happen? And just be honest with yourself. Have that conversation, like I said, with yourself or with somewhere else. With someone else, sorry. If you don't set yourself realistic goals, you're going to set yourself up for disappointment, even if you can make considerable progress. So I see this actually quite a lot with some clients and some guys on the team. They'll be pulling body weight off consistently, dropping body fat. Let's say they're maybe pulling off like 1.5 pounds a week, right? Which is pretty good rate of loss if you can do that consistently. But they had in their head that they wanted to drop 20 pounds in 10 weeks, right? So they're not hitting the rate of loss that they need to see in order to make that progress. So it links back to disappointment. Even though you're making considerable progress, you're making really, really good progress actually, you're still going to be disappointed with it because it's just not reaching the levels that you thought it would. You're not hitting the standard that you thought you were going to be hitting. But that's not because you aren't capable of it. It's because it is unattainable, really, for most people. So, yeah, from there, give yourself goals that are realistic, be honest with yourself, and then push for that. You might be able to surprise yourself. You might be able to, outdo yourself a little bit, which is, of course, great. But don't set these super unrealistic goals for where you're currently at in your journey. Now, part 2, which links into patience. If you realize that where you want to be is going to take you, let's say, 1 year, if you realize where you want to be versus where you are now is going to take you a year rather than 12 weeks, then you should embrace this. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, it is perhaps a lot longer than what you would like it to be, and it's a lot longer than what you thought, but that is the journey. That is the part that you need to learn to love. You're about to go on a journey, and in the grand scheme of things, it might be a little bit later down the line, but it's not going to matter much anyway, because I can guarantee that your goals will continue to grow through that journey. So what you would have previously been happy with 1 year ago will now seem somewhat mediocre compared to what you want now. And that's natural, because when you start your journey, what you think is possible, what you believe you're possible of achieving kind of quickly goes out the window. For a lot of people, they realize that, okay, I'm actually capable of way more than what I thought. So these goals constantly get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's a good thing. That's super natural. So there's a popular gym phrase that links to this. The day that you start in the gym is the day that you'll never be confident with your body again, because you get exposed to new heights and you get exposed to what's actually possible. And this is good. This is the journey. This is what you need to learn to love. You need to learn to love that journey of always improving yourself, always looking for the next mountain to climb, always looking for what's next. What can I do now? I've proved to myself, what I've achieved in the past. I've done that. I've ticked that off. That I didn't previously think I was capable of doing that, but now I've kind of built this confidence that I can actually go and pursue goals that I used to think were really scary. That's the part that you need to learn to enjoy, the process, not the outcome. So that's the 3 things that I would say in a nutshell that you need to focus on. Preparation, you need to focus on mindset, you need to focus on patience and expectations. Now, in the next couple episodes, we can dive into things a little bit more specifically with like tips for training and tips for nutrition and like real things that you can just take away straight away from the podcast and implement straight into your lifestyle, because that's the sort of content and the sort of value that I like to deliver. Like wee tips that you can just take away straight away and deploy into your lifestyle. But without these building blocks and without these foundations in place, it's then really, really hard to use those wee nuggets of value and those wee nuggets of information and actually deploy them into your lifestyle. You need to have these foundations in place, first of all, before you do that. So you probably noticed that these podcasts are going to be a little bit shorter. They're probably going to come at you in sort of like wee 15 or 20-minute episodes. And I do want to just try and get a little bit more value across, but I would like to do it in a little bit more of a relaxed manner and start to build to the point where we feel as though we're just having a bit of a conversation. And I would like to perhaps expand the podcast into getting some guests on, and we can chat with, different people, over the months, and get their views and their opinions and get their value as well for you guys. But first couple of podcasts, solo. So it's a little bit daunting for myself, not going to lie. A little bit daunting for me, but we'll get there. And this will become a lot more fluid, to be fair. So yeah, that is podcast number 2 wrapped up on 3 things that you need to do if you're about to start or you're just starting your fitness journey. And it can also be 3 things that you can reflect on if you are on your fitness journey right now and you've maybe hit a bit of a lull, a bit of a plateau. Reflect on these 3 things and just go over them again. Something that would be good to check up on every few months and just think, okay, have I got, am I prepared? Do I have the right mindset for what I want right now? And am I being patient enough? And what are my expectations? Where are my current expectations with where I want to go? It's nice to go over that every couple of months with yourself. But cheers for listening, guys. I am going to sign off. I was going to say, what am I signing off for? I'm going to say ciao is what I'm going to do. If you enjoyed this or you feel like someone can take anything from this podcast, please send it with them. Send it over to them. That's kind of the main thing that'll probably help me the most, is if you just share it with your pals that they can get some value from this, then muy bueno. Yeah, catch you in the next one.